you don't have to look any further than Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Darnell Nurse, the core of this team with Nugent Hopkins. They've been around for a while. And they've endured some tough times. And they see the light at the end of the tunnel now. And I think especially last year, going to the conference final, and I know people will say, okay, well, they had a good run. They went to the conference final. But they weren't satisfied with that. We as commentators and we as analysts watching the games and watching this team develop have said, okay, that's a real big step in my opinion to go that far. They get up against the eventual Stanley Cup champions in the Avalanche. They lose that series. But I think that's invaluable going into the summer to allow them to understand what they have to do to get to the next step. And I just think that they've come in this year, and that's the mentality they have. The expectation is very high in Edmonton, and that's, expectation from them as individuals, personally, the way they look at the game, where they feel they should be. And that's the most important thing. We always have expectations from the outside looking at what a team should do and how we think they should play. But until the expectation is a reality in that room and they understand, listen, we have a very good group here. We have a very good chance to do something special with the likes that we have in this dressing room, building around that nucleus. And I do believe that. I believe they're certainly one of the top 5 teams in the league. I think any team that comes in here understands the difficulty in the matchup going up against the likes of those two centermen and what they can throw at you. A defense core that's finding their way, putting it together, goaltending. Jack Campbell hasn't necessarily gotten off to the great numbers start that he wants to, but he's got 5 wins. They're finding a way to win. He's getting some run support at the time, and there will come a time when he's going to have to bail the team out, and I have no doubt that'll happen. Stuart Skinner, as a young goalie, has stepped in there and given them excellent goaltending, so he's really pushed Campbell, I think, to start dialing in that game as well. It's a work in progress, but it's certainly working in the right direction.
We're talking to Louie DeBrusk, hockey analyst with Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada. Louie, the words you just uttered, especially around expectations, really mirror the Toronto Maple Leafs here. And it mirrors to the point where it's kind of scary. 2 superstars who are counted on to carry the bulk. A blue line that kind of gets challenged at times for being like the Achilles heel, but one really solid guy in Morgan Riley, one in Darnell Nurse, yet the Oilers feel like legit and people are questioning the Toronto Maple Leafs. What is the difference here outside of 2 superstars on each team having to drive play every night here?
Good question. If I had to take a guess at it and scrape it down to the basics, I would tell you that it's the way they're playing the game. I truly believe that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are, going to abandon offense to play a strong defensive game every single second of the game, but I do know it's been a priority in both of their games. It's been a priority for the team to play the right way. Jay Woodcroft coming in, I think, has been very important in that regard, in the way he wants them to play the game. And he's been very vocal about that. He hasn't changed his tune, and I don't think he ever will. But I think the team understands, and I think they're seeing the benefits of grinding out some tough wins, of facing that adversity, having to come back. And that's one of the things they have to work on, is getting better early in games. No question about it. They got scored on last night, 30 seconds into the game, but then they stormed back with 4 straight. And that's the firepower they have. And when they get rolling, they can really run you over. But at the same time, it was a fluky goal. I'll give it. It was a nice job by Ekholm to be in the spot, but it hits a skate, bounces right to a stick. He tucks it home. Call it what it is. That's one of the things that they're really trying to work on, is making sure they stabilize early and make it tougher for the opponent to get off to a good start. But I think it's structure. I think it's the system they're playing. I think it's the confidence in the way they play. They have a belief that if they play that way, they give themselves a chance because of the way they could put the puck in the net. And I think if you look at the Leafs, guys, when they were playing very well, it was very similar. They were playing a very aggressive, fast-paced, attacking style that took away time and space of the opposition and had the skill to make things happen when they had the puck. They were an excellent team with the puck, and they were better at getting it back. I think right now maybe a little bit off of that. They're struggling a little bit with that. They're trying to find that identity again, and obviously the pressure's been piled on there, but it's early. I don't necessarily panic as much about the Leafs as somebody in that market would, because we're a little bit distance away from it. So when I look at the team, I'm like, okay, it's still early. This is a team that can still go on a run and can still figure it out, and there's lots of time to do that. But I understand the importance of having a good start, and I realize why teams and fan bases look at it and say, hey, we need to get things going here. We just saw a team last night, the Nashville Predators, that I think the record should be different. I look at that team and I watch the way they play, and it's the same thing. Look at the amount of talent they have in that organization. They have a Norris-winning defenseman. Saros has proven that he can be a starting goaltender and a great goaltender. The back end is strong. They have 2 40-goal scorers up front. They have all the makings. They can play physical. I think the toughest team in the National Hockey League. I don't think anybody wants to get into a physical battle with the Nashville Predators on a regular basis. But they just can't seem to find the scoring at the right time, get the save at the right time, and defend enough to keep games close. It's gotten away from them early in the year. But I do know that when they do figure it out, they're going to be a really hard team to play against. But it needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I agree with the same thing with the Leafs. They certainly want to figure it out, and they want to get in the winning ways.
Louie, I want to get your thoughts on a power dynamic between superstar players and coaches. Kyper talked a little bit about the overlap between the Oilers and the Leafs, the similarities. There are a lot. They both have 2 superstars. You can argue that 2 of the best players in the world on both teams. They both have first-time head coaches, and both of them previously had long-time head coaches, Dave Tippett and Mike Babcock. There's almost a point where those players seem to have more power than their coaches, more authority, more whatever you want to call it. How do you make it work when it doesn't feel like the head coach is the guy who holds all the authority?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I've always felt, though, the best players in the game. And again, I'll go back to something Jay Woodcroft said early in his tenure here with Edmonton. Now, obviously, he was here before as an assistant coach, so he knows some of these players that were still there at that time. He said, I think the best players in the game, or best players in any sport, want to be led, want to be coached. They're asking the right questions all the time. They want to get better. Their desire is to be the best and to get better each and every day. And I'll take Connor McDavid for an example. I watch practice all the time. He's the hardest working guy on the ice. Like, there's no question. Like, you don't have to really guess who Connor McDavid is. You don't have to have numbers on the jerseys. That's the guy that's skating the fastest, working the hardest every single practice. So therefore, that leads by example. I think from a coaching perspective, when you're dealing with that elite of a player that has that much of an expectation on himself, which, let's face it, guys like McDavid, guys like Matthews, they've had the weight of the world on their shoulders all the time. There's always that expectation that they have to be the ones that make it happen. And the biggest asset they have is they've been able to deal with that. They've been able to deal with that and be 2 of the greatest players ever to play the game and go out there and put it on the ice on a nightly basis. There's going to be lapses, no question, but internally their desire to be the best should be the overwhelming character trait that makes them the greatest player on their team, or potentially in the league or in history.